We are going through the speaker's primer, and this is chapter 16. Chapter 16 is on persuasive speeches, and the first thing the book talks about is the persuasive process. The first step in the persuasive process is just issue awareness, being aware of and perceiving that there is an issue to think about. The second stage is comprehension. When we understand the issue and what the options are for responding to the issue. The third stage of the persuasive process is acceptance. We accept that the issue is relevant to ourselves. And the final stage is the audience adopting position that you want them to take, or that we want them to take. So there are 4 steps in this process, and without any one of these steps, the process will not take place. All 4 have to occur for persuasion to take place. Some types of credibility that are available to the speaker. Credibility is the ability of a person to inspire belief or trust in others. Credibility. There's the initial credibility. You have a certain level of credibility that you come in with, especially when we're in a classroom setting and we're in the class a lot. And it's a little different with an online class, but typically when we go to class, and we go to class every day, we see the people that are there all the time. We see the people that are on time all the time. We see the people that have their work turned in all the time. And those people derive a certain amount of credibility before they ever get up to do a speech. Derived credibility is the credibility that you achieve during the speech. It can be just the fact that you walk up ready to go and are prepared and launch into it. Part of it can be your enthusiasm about the topic, your passion about the topic. If you are giving a persuasive speech, and I talked about this in an earlier chapter, and you do not have passion about the topic, you will lose credibility versus gaining credibility. There's your perceived level of preparation, your delivery, your organization, the quality of your evidence, and the way you speak to the audience, whether or not they agree with you. Even respecting the audience gains you some credibility. The terminal credibility is what you leave with after you walk out, as the audience starts to think about what it is you've said. What credibility do they give you then? Your conclusion, by the way, can affect your credibility. If you go through your persuasive speech, or any speech really, and as you get to the end of your speech, you just say, well, that's it, I'm done. You lose credibility, whether it's an informative speech or a persuasive speech, because there should be a conclusion that leaves us with something to think about. And the audience knows this. The audience knows this. Types of persuasive speeches, there are questions about fact. I actually had a young lady get up and argue that we indeed did not walk on the moon. And so that's a question of fact. We either did or we did not. What is the evidence? Questions about values. Values are things that are important to us. Freedom, time, choice, family, friendship. There are a lot of different values in our society. Some of them are in dispute. Questions about policy. What should be the government's role about something? Without taking any stand, by the way, I will mention one that can be covered in all 3. Abortion is talked about and from all 3 perspectives in some speeches, and sometimes they're just one, sometimes they cover all 3. Questions of fact might be the question of when does life begin? Questions of value. What is the value? The value of life versus the value of choice can be weighed in. Questions of policy. What should the government's policy be? Questions about Roe v. Wade and the ability of the need, some say, for the Supreme Court to overturn it or not overturn it. Another type of persuasive speech is a speech of refutation. A speech of refutation is a very powerful thing, especially in terms of speeches about hot button topics about which we all know the arguments. If it's a hot button topic, we all know the arguments on both sides, and then you or a speaker takes one side and refutes each main argument that they have, the only thing left standing is the other side. That can be a very powerful persuasive speech. Of course, we've talked a little bit about organizational patterns. We've already talked about problem solution, problem cause solution. Some would call this cause effect problem solution. It can be done that way as well. Comparative advantages is powerful, especially when there are different potential solutions to a problem, and you're showing why your solution has advantages over the other side. The Monroe's motivated sequence, the first thing you do is get the audience's attention. You show the audience and establish for the audience that there is a need that we have as a society or group or as individuals possibly. The third step is to show something that will satisfy that need. It's called the satisfaction step. Here is how we can satisfy this need that we have. And the fourth element, you ask us to visualize, in some way present sort of a visual picture of how things will be better once we take this step that will satisfy the need. And then the fifth step in Monroe's motivating sequence is just a call to action. Now that we can see there's a need, now that we can see that this action, this will satisfy that need, now that we can see that it will make things better for all of us, let's take this action now. Adjusting to the audience during your speech, you can face 3 different kinds of audiences. Actually, there are 4, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, the book does only 3, I believe, but there really are 4. There's a favorable audience. You say, well, I love preaching to the choir, and everyone agrees with me. That's great. Well, that's fine, except for one thing. One of the most difficult things to do is to get people to act on their beliefs, at least what they say their beliefs are. Ask any church pastor. Talk about a certain topic and watch and see how many people start taking action on that. Adapting to a neutral audience. The audience really doesn't necessarily care. They're a different thing, a different burden of proof that you have. Adapting to a hostile audience. Very, very different burden of proof for a hostile audience. The other audience that this book does not mention that you can face is an apathetic audience. That's an audience that just doesn't care. That's very problematic, even harder to really to address than the audience that's against you, because the audience that disagrees with you may well listen to you, but an audience that's apathetic, well, that's a hard audience to get to actually listen to you at all. That is the end of chapter 16 on persuasive speeches, and we will go to chapter 17 of the Speaker's Primer next.